Hi, everyone. Hope everyone's doing well. Say we wait like 3 more minutes. See if we get any more people and then we can get started.
Also, I should preface some of the questions that are going to be asked because at least in the spreadsheet or in the questions doc thing, some of the questions were like very broad. So if you guys want to jump in towards the end with like specific examples of stuff that you guys want to talk through, then we can definitely do that. And that's what Kieran and I talked about before this. If you guys have any specific examples of like, hey, I'm doing this, I was wondering how this would play out. Because I think one of the questions that were asked was like, how do I know if I have a good idea? Or how do I know that my idea solves a problem? And I was like, it would be helpful to get more information if that was one of you guys that posted the question. So little things like that we can talk about later, time permitting.
Sounds good. Honestly, since this meeting is shorter, we might as well just get started now, if that's cool with everyone. And then people can jump in as needed.
Plus, this is recorded, so it's like they can just watch this later.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, well, sounds good. Hi, everyone. This is our second chapter of the entrepreneurship series with Matheus. This one specifically on idea and market validation. So a little bit more tailored of a talk since we've gotten past kind of like the basics of everything in our last chapter. So we'll go ahead and get started with some questions that we put together. So, and then again, at the end, if people have questions, please put it in the chat or we'll open it up and people can like unmute themselves and talk. So yeah, okay. I will ask the first question. How do I know if my idea is valuable? What differentiates a good idea from a great idea?
How do I know if my idea is valuable? So I will continually, forever, still tell you guys to reference this book, which is called Disciplined Entrepreneurship by Bill Olet. So that's like the best point of reference, I guess, that I would have for you guys. If you're really like at least serious about entrepreneurship, I would definitely buy it, read it, find it online through I don't know what means that you choose, and just read it because it's very, very useful. So this is like a brief excerpt from that book where it says like the single necessary and sufficient condition for a business is a paying customer. So if you want to be able to produce some type of good that is valuable to people, then it needs to be, you have to have a person that's willing to pay for it. So you can have a great idea. Nobody cares about your idea unless they're willing to pay for it. So keeping that in mind is going to be very helpful. And then the other thing too is like the other thing that they mentioned as well in the book is that the day when you have a person that's willing to pay for your product or service is the day when you have a business. So until you have someone that is willing to take their hard-earned cash and put it into your idea or your service, then it's not necessarily valuable. I mean, ideas in general, it's great to have ideas, but the way that you would characterize value for a product would be if someone's willing to pay you whatever X amount of money for it. And then discerning whether a good idea or a bad idea, well, the difference between a good idea and a great idea is tough because it's like, in part, it's like a philosophical question. And because I could ask you the same questions, like what makes for some really good paella or like some really great paella, you know what I mean? So it's like, what's that like home cooked meal that like really hits home to you, and the next day you're just like, man, I wish I had another helping of it. Like what to you distinguishes the difference between like really good, really great food and really like okay food. And the way that I would like summarize it would be that just like you have a desire to go back to it, right? There's like a stickiness to it, that like grabs your attention, that solves a problem for you. And so like there are apps that I'm 100% positive that you use, that you use constantly over and over again. And the reason why you use it over and over again is because it solves a problem to you, which is boredom, right? So you're bored, you have nothing else to do. It's COVID. You're stuck at home. You're waiting for something to happen at work, and you just get on your phone, you turn on, and you go to that one app every single time. It grabs your attention that first time, and then you're like, okay, I trust it to solve that problem of my boredom again the next time around. And so that's what causes you to keep going back to it. And it's like a feedback loop. It just keeps going and going. And so Instagram does a really great job of that, because it customizes the preferences and different things to tailor to your wants and your needs. So hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. So the next question is, how do I know if a market is a good market to target, and what tools exist to identify markets when coming up with an idea?
So a good place to start in terms of like identifying your market, you have to first, before you even identify your market, you have to know who your end user is. So who is going to be the person that's going to be using your product or your services? Like if you take Facebook, for example, like the way that they started was as a social networking site, to connect people across different like college campuses at the very, very beginning. And then so much so that in the very beginning, the founders of Facebook actually limited the amount of people that are going on to Facebook. And then they slowly started to increase and started to expand to like different colleges in the Boston area. And from there, they went to like Ivy League schools. And from there, they went throughout the United States and Canada. And so like the technology in and of itself was just to connect people on a platform. And then, but this same technology, this same platform could have been used for connecting like war veterans. Like after serving any time in war, they could have connected them together and be like, hey, let's get together and let's do this thing. And this same thing could have been done with like book clubs, but it wasn't. So like I can only speculate as to why they decided to target college campuses. But probably a good reason was because of the fact that it was something that they know. Like they know how college students act because they were college students at the time. And then on top of that, they also, like studies show that younger people have a tendency to be able to adopt new technologies and new products more quickly than an older demographic. So, and to be honest with you, like, I think that the best way to identify like what tools that you could use to come up with like identifying your market, the best way to do that is just grab a pen or pencil and like piece of paper and just like create a list of like all the different types of people that would be impacted by your idea, and put them into like groups. So like if you have like war veterans, like these people are going to be the people that I'm going to be targeting. These are the things these are the ways that this group is going to be using this technology. And then in the same way, you can say like, hey, if I'm targeting people that are book buyers, then these are the ways that this technology is going to be used to engage, that help them engage with one another. So there's a series of different ways that you can identify that like market, to come up with it, to identify what tools. Like that would be a good place to start. Just brainstorming, like put pen and pencil to paper and just writing, you know?
Okay, so if I have an idea for a business or product, but I have no clue how to sell that idea, what should I do?
So this is one of those questions that I ask like to get a little bit more clarification on, mainly because like when in terms of like in terms of knowing how to sell the idea, it could mean a series of different things. So it would be helpful if I knew the person's perspective, because like, does it mean selling the idea to a person that could potentially join your venture? Does it mean selling your idea so that you can get into an accelerator? Does that mean selling your idea to get and like present to an angel investor? Like, if none of you are willing to clarify what that question, well, what was meant by that question, I guess the way that I would go about answering the question would be just to target, like, specifically if you're trying to recruit someone onto your team. A good place to start would just be identifying, like, what are some of the common bonds that you guys share over this idea, like, because at the end of the day, you need to solve a problem. Like, that's the first and foremost, most important thing that you need to do. It needs to solve a problem. So why would this idea be exciting to this person? Like, you should be able to answer the question, like, why would this person want to join my venture in the first place? What would they get out of this? And these are all questions that you can ask them as well, if that's the route that the question was taking. Like, what are they looking for? Like, what experience are they trying to gain? These are some of the questions that you should be able to answer yourself. If this is sort of like the line of reasoning for the question, which I'm just speculating because I don't really know. So that would be my take on that, at least.
Sweet, yeah. How important should the size of a target market be? How much detail does one need to know about their market to be successful?
So the size of the market is incredibly important for any person that wants to do like entrepreneurship. It is literally like, I think, step 3 in that book that I mentioned. It is literally, I believe it's step 3, and it's called identifying your beachhead market. So your beachhead market, the reasoning why that term is used is because during World War II, the United States landed on the beaches of Normandy. That was the first place that they started, by which they could start their invasion into Germany. And so the reasoning why it's called beachhead market is because you have to identify, like, what's the first market that you can get into and just crush. Like, what's the first market that you can get into and just really do well, and like be able to conquer that, so that once you've conquered that market, then you can go off into adjacent markets and offer different products. So you firstly, like, you need to know who is your target audience, and identify how large it is. Because if you are targeting your abuelos and just trying to figure out, like, hey, I'm selling this to my grandparents and their friends, and like, if it's just them, then you're probably not going to be able to create a sustainable like business. Depends on how many grandparents you have and how many friends they have. But considering if it is a small number of people, then you want to be able to target as many people as possible, right? So like Amazon is a good example where like they targeted book buyers, and like that's initially how they got started. They just decided, Jeff Bezos decided, I'm going to focus on people that are buying books, and then just like crush it in that department. But then from there, he like slowly started to incorporate all these different items and goods, and eventually he just became like this huge, like, Amazon became this overwhelming presence in digital space, and so much so that there's, if you are taking notes, a really good documentary that you can watch is called Amazon Empire: The Rise and Reign of Jeff Bezos. So it's on YouTube. I forget how long it is, to be honest with you, but it's really great, and also like kind of scary in terms of like what stuff that they're currently doing, and how big and like just wide ranging and like that they are. So if you are looking into trying to get more of an understanding of like how do you identify the market, that would be a good example. But in terms of like knowing how much detail that you need all the details. So you just need to be like on top of your game in terms of knowing like who exactly you're targeting, and you need to know like how you're going to like conquer that market in such a way that other people can't. And so like you need to know, this is what I'm doing. You need to know like who are the competitors, like who are these people that you're competing against, what products are they selling, what is my future product going to sell or do differently that these products currently aren't doing. And so like these are all things that you personally need to know in order for you to create a successful startup, because the benefit that these current companies already have is that they already are like, they have created products, they have created a need, or have provided the solution to a need that existed in the market and are doing well in that space. So you need to know as much information as you can possibly get about these companies so that you can be able to pivot and focus on different things. So Jeff Bezos had a lot of knowledge about what the book industry looked like. From there, he started to invest more time and energy into learning more about that space, and then slowly started to conquer it. And then once he had that competitive advantage over other booksellers, which are just like casual bookstores, then he could go off into different things. But you need to know like how many competitors there are, like what are all the list all the people that are currently in your company, that are currently your competitors, and then go from there. Like you have to know quite a bit, and it's actually the other part to that question was like, can I just have a general understanding of the competition? And if you are a person that wants to be a successful startup, like that is, it's almost like it's almost like a cop out, for lack of a better term. You can't have just like general knowledge on the topic, because if you have ever played sports, you want to have any competitive advantage over the team that you're going to be playing against. So if you know that the person has the person that's going to be matching up with you on the court or on the pitch, if you know that they have a weak left side or they have a tendency to lean towards the left, then you can take that to your advantage and then you can play accordingly. So in the same way, if the more information you have about competitors, the better off you'll be.
Okay, so how should I proceed if there are a bunch of potential markets which fit my idea?
So it starts off back with the same thing that I mentioned before, which is like the beachhead market. So what are the people that you're targeting to start off? Like who are the group of people that I can start to try to sell this product or services, and do really, really well and really get their attention. Like those are the people that you need to like identify first and foremost, before, like, because as you brainstorm on the potential markets that you can target, the different markets that you can dive into, you need to know like what are the strengths and weaknesses of trying to go into that market. So I'm going to be much, much harder. Like I'm hoping that none of you desire to sell to in the self-defense industry like right out the gate, because it's going to be very difficult, right? Like there are so many other people that are probably much more well-equipped and much wiser and that have different connections that you probably don't have at this point, unless you do, which has off to you if you do. And so like you want to be able to like know how are these different markets going to be affected by my idea, and then once you find out which one is the easiest to get into, that's the one that you should pick, because you're gonna have less difficulties and less hurdles to jump through in order for you to like sell to those groups of people. So like if I was trying to sell to the Army Research Lab that they have in Natick, I probably wouldn't be able to get there, mainly because of the fact that I don't have any connections there. There are also probably so many like logistical and like different regulations that you have to jump through in order for you to sell to that group of people. So it's identifying like who are the people that I can start off with. Same thing with like Jeff Bezos. He started off with, like I said, he started off with people that enjoy books, and then he was like, okay, this is a market that I can do really, really well, and put everything online so that people can buy all these things and sell them very, very easily. And then he just continued to expand more and more products. So it's identifying where to start is tough, but once you've identified where to start, then it becomes much easier for you to focus. And focus is like the big F word in startups. Like you have to know what your specific market that you're targeting is.
Awesome. Thank you for that insight. We actually have a question from the chat. Should you think about logistics first of the business rather than perfecting the engineering part of your project? And what is a good balance for you in terms of developing the physical product and doing everything else associated with that?
Great question. Yeah, because that was a great freaking question. Yeah, thinking about the logistics is like, you don't want to spend money. Like nobody, like your goal is to spend the least amount of money to get things off the ground. So if you can get away with not spending any money and just like coding your way into getting people to pay for your idea, hats off to you. Like that is the best case scenario, right? And so but like, of course, as you asked, there's a good balance of identifying like how do you identify the logistics, and how do you like a good place to start, just go to that book, start reading and talking to people and seeing if there is actually a problem there, and then if there is, then you can start like just playing around with the technology and seeing if you can create like a wireframe, like an app that wireframe or a desktop wireframe that can be presented to these people, and then they can get that insight and be like, hey, this is actually like not what I expected. I expected it to look like this. And then you can change whatever you prototyped using the least amount of money possible in order for you to create like the next iteration and the next iteration. So spending the least amount of money possible is like best thing. That's the goal. Like that's what you aim towards. Yeah, and then in terms of developing product, yeah, develop the business plan or like start to talk to people, do primary market research first, and then start to develop a product. You don't want to create a product and then start finding people that would buy the product. That's a no-go. Unless you're Steve Jobs, which you're not. At least I don't think that you are. Then if that is the case, which I believe that it is, definitely create like, if you're presenting to investors, slide 2 or 3 has to be like, this is the problem that I'm solving, and then slide 3 would be, this is my solution. Yeah, so hopefully that answers the question.
I think this is a good time to kind of open it up a little bit more. If people did think of additional questions throughout, feel free to unmute yourself and go ahead and ask. If not, then we can just move on with additional questions we have on the doc.
I have one question. How do you go about making sure your idea isn't already out there in the market? Like, how do you know for sure? Besides just, I guess, a Google search, like a patent search. Yeah, that's my question.
That's tough, right? Because like, if it's incredibly difficult, because like whenever you search for anything in Google, they're searching key terms. They're searching like, if you're talking about a phone, then you're searching like electronics, cell phone, different things like that. Like you're searching different terms that are related to that. So the best way to evaluate whether or not the product even exists would be just to like do due diligence and like what are all the variations of this product, like what could be out there. And then if you see that the product doesn't exist after doing like countless hours of, it doesn't have to be like countless hours, but after realizing that there isn't a product like that out there, then you can start asking questions. But even if you, let's say you were to go in and do research and try to find whether or not this product actually exists, the best way for you to figure out whether the product exists is by asking the people who would benefit from the solution whether or not the product exists as well. Like that's another way to do research, because if you are talking to like, if you end up talking to over like 10 people and they are all saying that, hey, this thing doesn't exist, I've never heard of this, then that's also a good indicator. But it's better for you to have a bigger pool of people that you're asking and not just ask like all the people in your dorm room. You know what I mean? Like ask people that are unrelated to you, unrelated to, that are probably like 2 degrees of, I think it's like 2 degrees of freedom away from you. I forget what it's called, the exact term. That would be the best way to like go about doing that research, but that's one way to do it.
I do have another question.
Yeah.
So my question that I asked before was more related to, well, I'll give you my example. I just want to develop any product to make my life easier, and also because I want to learn stuff and be more competitive in the workforce.
Yeah.
And the question is, when do you know, when is the right time for you to understand that whatever you're making can be a product and can be sold to somebody? And then you can go more towards all the logistics and all that, besides doing all the research first to know if it's going to work, talking to people. But when do you think you should start thinking about that, the business side, rather than just the engineering, which is, for me, the fun part? When should you start focusing on the other part?
As early as possible. Which is not what you want to hear, right? Because the fun part for you is just like doing the engineering part. But like I said, the first thing that you need to create a successful business is a paying customer. So if people are willing to pay, like if you have this product that you have already created to make your life easier, if you find friends of yours that are willing to pay like $5, $10 a month to use that, then like you've created a business. And it's not a successful business yet because you don't have enough people to continue to subscribe to those services for a long period of time. But it's a good start for you to identify like how you can help these people. So hopefully that answers your question.
I guess in a nutshell, just always keep it like in the back of your mind that you can make business out of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's like it doesn't hurt to know that you can make money off of whatever you're doing. It's good to keep an open mind. There's nothing wrong with that, and it's part of the hustle, right?
Thank you.
Awesome question and awesome response. Thank you, Matheus. I have a question, kind of more of a steering question. Given that, coming up with an idea, there's a lot of different points logistically that could lead to a failure, right? And given that failure is so prevalent in practice and coming up with something new in general, what would be one piece of advice that you would give on practicing coping with failure as an entrepreneur?
I think it's like fail hard and fail often. I think that's the term. But it's like if you're gonna fail very quickly, so that you can learn from them and then continue to reiterate. And then number 2 would be you're gonna fail. I'm gonna fail. Every single one of it. Any person that wants to be an entrepreneur is going to fail. How you deal with that failure looks different, right? So like I created the dashboard for the wireframe for an app that I would use to interface with the technology that I'm creating. And I reached out to people that I think would benefit from it, and they were like, hey, this isn't what I was expecting. I expected it to look more like this. Is that a failure? Not really. That's just good feedback so that I can iterate and do better. So it's like, it depends on, like, I think the best way for you to think about failures is just like another opportunity for you to grow and for you to learn new things. Because that just means that you haven't learned enough and that you have more opportunities to learn. So yeah, don't think of failure as a bad thing. Failure is a very good thing because it just shows you what your blind spots are.
Any more questions? This meeting's only half an hour, so we're getting close on time.
I have one quick question. Is there ever a case where you kind of have like a great idea, but you don't have the technical knowledge to like actually fully develop the product yourself?
Absolutely.
And how do you go about like either, well, I guess gaining that knowledge, but sometimes things are just very complex that you can't gain all that knowledge. So how do you go about like managing your idea with your lack of knowledge in the field of actually like building and engineering, not necessarily like the business side of things?
Yeah, I'm there. I'm 100% there right now. And this might be the last question that I can answer, but I think that the best thing that any of you can do is like, this is not just like for being an entrepreneur. This is just in life in general. Just like identify what are your strengths. What are you good at? Like, I know that I'm really good at talking to people. I understand how things work. I understand how to put together different checkpoints of things that I need to happen in order for me to get from point A to point B. But there are some people that are much more technically competent than others. I don't enjoy coding as much as I would like to. For me, it's a means to an end. Like, I do coding. I'm good at it, but that's not what I wake up excited to do, right? I'm excited to talk to people, to figure out what their problems are so I can try to solve it. So identifying what your strengths are is a huge thing. And then if you're trying to create or you're trying to identify how you can solve that technical problem, there are certain technical expertise that you don't have, and like, that's okay. It's expected, right? So that's why a majority of startups, they have at least more than one person, mainly because of the fact that you don't know what your blind spots are. Like, even though you may know what they are, you may not know what all of them are. And like, having people around you that might have a business perspective to your technological perspective is very helpful. And they're going to add to what you already know. And that teamwork is going to be much more well suited for the success of your company. So a good way for you to like even find people that could potentially help you out with your idea would be just like reaching out to professors and being like, hey, do you know of any person that would be willing to work on this idea with me? And it doesn't have to be a startup. It's just an idea that you're trying to hash out the details for. Like, this could just be a semester project or a month-long project that you're working on just to see where it goes. And there's no long-term commitment to this. It's just, hey, I just wanted to see on the other end as well, you need to do your due diligence, and you need to make sure that you're serious about it. Like, you have to show to the other person, to the professor, whoever it is, that you're serious about what you're doing. You've done your research, and that you are confident in what you're in the avenue and in the way that you're going to go about creating this thing. If you go to a professor, and if you go to and you can be like, hey, I'm a Northeastern student, I'm looking into doing this thing, I was wondering if you happen to know of 1 or 2 people that I could talk to that could potentially help me solve this technical issue that I'm having. Like, if you do that, I guarantee to you that you will find there are a lot of people willing to help. And if you can even say like, hey, if you don't know of anybody, do you know of anybody that I could ask in order for me to try to figure out or try to identify someone that could help me solve this technical issue? Like, that would be a good way for you to go about overcoming that technical hurdle, because I currently have it too. And that's okay. It's completely fine. And it would be silly for me to say this, like, you have all the skills that you need to be an entrepreneur, which you don't. And neither do I. And it's about finding people that can fill in those gaps that you don't. already have a solution to.
All right. Thank you.
You got it, man.
Great. I think that's a good spot to end on. Thank you everyone for joining, and thank you Matheus again for offering your insight. I'm sure everyone learned a lot, and yeah, hopefully we'll have another series going in the next few weeks or so. If people are interested, look out for maybe a Google form or a text from me, and we will go from there.
Sounds good. It's great talking to you guys.
Thank you, Matheus.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye everyone.
Bye.